Welcome back, War Thunder players. My fourth installment in the Sim Lesson series will be over how to shoot down enemy planes. This lesson will be broken down into two parts, leading and optimal times to attack. For the first section, we are going to cover the three things you need to keep in mind when attacking your enemy. The first thing to keep in mind is how fast your opponent is going. The faster your opponent is going, the more lead you'll have to give them when shooting at them. And also, with more speed comes more energy, and more energy means more maneuverability, so more than likely the faster your opponent is going, the more they can maneuver. The second factor to keep in mind is your opponent's direction and their maneuvering. Which direction they're facing is going to determine which way you'll have to lead the shots. And in terms of the enemy's maneuvers, if you can anticipate your enemy's maneuvers before they do them, you can put your plane in the right position to get hits on the enemy. The last thing to keep in mind is your patience and ability to fly the aircraft. This is a difficult skill to master. The only way to get better is to practice more and more. The more experience you have in your aircraft, the deadlier you are in it. Now that your head's in the right space to get hits on the enemy, we can talk about leading your target. There are three strategies of leading when it comes to shooting at your enemies. The first one is one I like to call line of fire. With this strategy, you try to put a straight line of fire through an area where you think your enemy is going to fly through. If everything is correct, he will fly through that line of fire and take some hits from those shots. This strategy is most effective with aircraft with high firepower. The second strategy is one that I call continuous fire. This is for when you've got the enemy right where you want them and you have a pretty good idea of what their range is. They've entered into a very steady turn and you're able to hit them with a long burst. This is a very effective strategy for airplanes with very low firepower. And the final strategy is one I call mix. For a mix strategy, you aim before your target, similar to a line of fire strategy, but you continue to try to stay with the aircraft that you are shooting at, as though you are doing a continuous fire. But instead of keeping the enemy aircraft in the same spot of your gun sight, you want to slowly allow the aircraft to come into the center of the gun sight, and somewhere between where you were aiming and the center of the gun sight, you will start to register hits. If you can do this just right, you'll get lots of damage no matter what kind of firepower your aircraft has. I believe the mix strategy will get you the best results in terms of consistent damage on your enemies, but it requires a fine touch on the controls to make those split-second movements to get it just right. Another tip for getting hits on your enemy is to move your pilot's head up higher in the cockpit so that he can see a little bit better over the nose and lower into the gun sight. The default key binding for this is holding comma and pressing the 8 button on the keypad. Doing this will increase the visibility out the front of your aircraft, give you more area to aim at your enemies, and get good hits. Alright, now that we're in the right headspace and we know how to move our pilot's head up in the cockpit, we can go on to some examples. This is probably going to be how most of your one-on-one encounters go. Knowing what your enemy is going to do strategy-wise will really help you here. We know as a 109 that this yak is probably going to try to turn fight us. So as we approach the yak, we're going to move our pilot's head up so that we can see lower into the gun sight. We're going to come in aimed on him, but expecting him to make a turn. Just as we expected, he's entered a turn, and now we're going to pull with him just to get him in the right spot of the gun sight and fire at him. And there we go, we successfully hit the yak and set him on fire. That ought to kill him. In this second example, we're going to be shooting at a stalled aircraft. Though most stalling aircraft are nearly out of energy, they still have just a little bit, so you'll still have to lead them just a tiny bit as they're falling out of the sky. We're flying around and we noticed a 109 is trying to belly stab someone by flying straight up to them. Luckily, we've shot him right as he's run out of energy and not moving at all. A good kill. In this example, we're in a 109 trying to save a friendly who is being boom and zoomed by a typhoon. When booming and zooming, the enemy is going to be going up and down, attacking during the downward stage. Don't forget, the slower your enemy is going, the less you have to lead. And when he's at the top of his loop, he won't be going any slower than he's going right then. Here we can see the Typhoon has an oil leak, making it very easy for us to follow him. He goes up to make a loop so he can dive back down on our friend, and that's when we pounce. And there we go, about as easy it can get. Since I brought up as easy as it gets, let's try and hit somebody who is either AFK climbing or just not paying attention. Alright, here we are in our 190 and we see a P-47 that is AFK climbing. It's important to remember that we'll still have to lead just a little bit for this plane because we are coming in at an angle that is not exactly behind him. But since he isn't turning and he's flying in a straight line, it should be very easy to get this right. Boom, there you go. For example number 5, this is really going to be useful for those who are having trouble anticipating what your enemy's about to do. This situation is what is known as tail scrubbing. You're going to be cleaning the tails of a friendly who has an enemy directly on their tail. This is going to help you predict where the enemy is going to go because he is going to follow the friendly as he tries to shoot him down. So if you see the friendly at the front of the line go to the right, know that your enemy is going to be going to the right just behind him. This strategy, it may be difficult to get the right lead on your opponent as there's usually a lot of twisting, turning, dodging, dipping, diving, what have you in this fight. However, using the line of fire technique will be very useful as you know where your enemy is going to go, though not necessarily when. Alright, the final strategy is going to be over how to shoot down a bomber. You might be surprised, but shooting down a bomber is not much more different than shooting down a fighter. My advice is to set up properly. I like to attack from the 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock high. You want to use the mixed leading strategy when it comes to bombers. Fly in, and as you get close, start to lead just a little bit too much and slowly drag the crosshair across the bomber until you get a lot of hits. It's important to remember once you've made your attack run, get out of the way of the bomber's guns. If you do everything perfectly, that bomber may go down in one run. There's no guarantee that can happen though, so sometimes you will have to fly back up and boom and zoom again. Continuing to do this tactic, however, will yield you very consistent results. Well, that wraps up this lesson. If there's any other topics that you'd like covered in future lesson videos, please let me know in the comments. I enjoy helping other players, and knowing exactly what they need help with would benefit me greatly. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll be seeing you again in another lesson video. See ya!